Recently, Vox released a video explaining how inflation works, and it was very wrong. At Learn Liberty, our mission is to educate people about what makes society free and prosperous, and how we can improve the world we live in. Once we saw the Vox video, we had to do something. So, let's dive in.
In a recession, lots of fish lose their jobs and stop spending money. And other fish get scared that they might be next, so they stop spending and start saving. And with less money being spent in the economy, the water level falls.
What? That sounds odd. We invited our good friend, Professor Anthony Davies, to explain what inflation actually is.
Inflation is the rise in the average price level, and people sometimes confuse this with rises in specific prices. So you see the price of milk go up and you say, well, that's inflation. It's not. During periods of inflation, some prices may go up, some prices may go down. What's important is that the average price level rises. That's what we call inflation.
But why is it important to properly understand this concept? Well, Professor Davies gives us some clear, practical examples.
Inflation erodes the purchasing power of dollars. So when we think about dollars, what really matters here is what the dollars will buy. And I can give you a very simple example. If I give you the option of I'm going to drop you on a desert island that has sand, a palm tree, and that's all, and you get a suitcase full of $1 million. Or I can drop you on a desert island. I'm not going to give you any money, but there's a house there, it has electricity, and there's food, and there's water, and there's heat, there's cooling, and there's medical equipment, and all of that. And if I ask you which of these two islands would you like to be on, clearly the answer is the second one. But then I stop and say, but wait a minute, on the first island I'll give you $1 million. But the point is, there's nothing to buy. It's the value of the goods and services that gives money value. And so when you have inflation and prices start to rise, your money buys fewer goods and services.
Okay, now that we have a clear picture of what inflation is, let's look at what's wrong with Vox's fish tank analogy.
And the point is that the analogy ends up invoking a fallacy, and the fallacy is what we call money illusion. And money illusion is the idea that numbers of dollar bills matter as opposed to the purchasing power of those dollar bills. So someone who succumbs to money illusion would say something like, I would rather live in New York City earning $100,000 than to live in Alabama earning $80,000. And you say, well, why? And he says, well, because in New York City I get $100,000. Well, that person's suffering from money illusion. He's only looking at the number of dollars, completely ignoring the purchasing power. And the fact is, $80,000 in Alabama will go far, far further than $100,000 will in New York City. And this is what Vox gets wrong with its analogy. As it talks about the water in the fishbowl, it says, well, look, the water gets too low, and what can happen is, to help the economy along, the government can come along and pump more water into the aquarium. Okay, but that looks a lot like money illusion, that what matters is the number of dollars. The analogy completely ignores the real important thing, which is the purchasing power of those dollars.
We have seen this in the US very recently. Money illusion affects everyone, but in the US, it affects lower income people the most.
And who does this inflation principally hurt? Well, it hurts people who, for example, are locked into their wages. If I have $100 sitting in my dresser drawer and the $100 will buy a certain amount of goods and services. Over time, if there's inflation, that $100 in my dresser drawer will now buy less than it did before. The inflation erodes the purchasing power of that money. When the economy goes into recession, people are out of work. Because they're out of work, they're not buying things. And because they're not buying things, businesses start to cut back on hiring, which just exacerbates the problem. And the idea of stimulus checks is to get the economic ball rolling. inject some money into the system so that people feel comfortable going out and buying things. And if they feel comfortable going out and buying things, businesses will feel comfortable hiring more workers, which generates income for the people, and then the economy starts to pick up. There are some problems associated with that. The political problem is in timing, is that politicians aren't aware that we're in recession until after the recession has already began. And then what do? They have to come up with some decision. What are we going to do about this? Well, we should increase spending. We should spend this way or that way. And so that also takes time. And so what can happen, doesn't happen in every case, but what can happen is that the government ends up pressing the accelerator, stimulating the economy at the exact wrong time, at the time when the economy is already coming out of recession. And we have a good example of that here. Joe Biden, when he took office in January, immediately started pushing for stimulus spending. And by the time all of that came to fruition, the economy was already coming out of recession. And so right now, as we're moving out of recession, that $2 trillion is now hitting the economy, which can push us into inflation. And all of that falls under the heading of the knowledge problem. That is, that politicians simply don't have enough information to be able to make decisions for people that are, on average, better than the people could make for themselves. So a politician might say he wants to help me, and he's going to help me by spending money. Well, the politician doesn't know my particular situation. He doesn't know what I need, what I want, what I'm capable of doing. And so when he makes the decision of how to spend the stimulus money, he ends up making choices that likely are choices I would not have made.
Explaining inflation in the correct way is very important because it makes a huge difference in our lives. Politicians might suggest that they know what is best for us, but they do not. If they make bad decisions for us, eventually it is us who suffer from it. Vox is suggesting that when we don't have enough money, we can turn to politicians and ask for more money. We needed to set the record straight and explain why we cannot do that. Comment below your opinion about this video and let us know what your saving strategies are during a recession.